Hi friends, I'm Jeffy G. Welcome back to the channel. A couple weeks ago, Excite Audio released a new sampler. It's a 4-layer multi-sampler where each of the sound sources could be either a sample or a synth. In this video, I'm going to go through the details of how it works. But more importantly, I'm going to look at some of the other multi-samplers that have come out over the last couple years as part of the overall evolution of what's going on with sampling. That'll include Cube by Lunacy Audio, Soundbox by Audiomodern, and Flite by Wavea software. Each has some unique attributes that are pushing the evolution of sampling.
evolvealloy by Excite Audio is a multi-sampler. It has 4 sources, A, B, C, and D. They can be either a sample or a synth. And the fact that they can be a synth is kind of a new thing. You use the XY pad in the middle to control the layering between the different sources. You can see sound A is a sample, sound B is a sample, and you've got some limited controls over that sample, like pitch, the fine tuning, the tone, the volume level, which is controlled here. So this is how you're going to mix the starting point if the dot was right in the middle. Sound C is a synth, and with that you've got a choice of just that help feature is tooltips in the settings. So I'm just going to turn that off. You've got your choice of about 5 different wave shapes, panning, sensitivity. So not as much control over synth sounds, but you can choose presets. So take the sampler. Right now it's on digital plucky. And if I click on different types of samples, I've got lots to choose from here. Acoustic, atonal, chords. Let's say I choose Metal Gear. You can swap your own samples in at any time just by dragging them into one of the 4 sound sources. And that will overwrite the sample that's in there, and you have some editing capabilities around that sample. There are 4 macros on the main page here at the bottom, and they have some creative labeling. Macro 1 is called Sharpen, and it's really a transient shaper. The next macro is called Rust. And rust is really distortion. The next one is vibrate, which is a bit of a slapback delay. And the last one is called spring, which is really just a variation on the reverb. If you click on the edit menu at the top, it will reveal a lot more effects that are available to you. And you can use this XY pad to control the layer blending between the different sources, or you can click on effects and do something similar with the effects. Amongst the effects, you've got saturation, feedback, bit crush delay, reverb compression. We already talked about the transient shaping. But you also have modulation, phaser, auto wall, width, and some other capabilities. If they're grayed out, it's because they're already in use here. The filter isn't overly fancy, but there are 2. At the bottom, it reveals the keyboard. Playing keys, they will appear. And from here, you can control things like velocity, ADSRs, of which you've got a separate one for each sound source. There's 2 LFOs, and these are pretty easy to use. There are 250 samples that come delivered, and they all have kind of a metal sound or a metal focus. Scroll through them by category. Everything from textures to pads and chords, even acoustic sounds. Now you're not limited to the samples that come delivered. If you don't want that metal focus, you could drag in any samples that you may have in your library. So this is really a generic multi-sample tool that has synth capabilities. I think Excite Audio focused on the metal sounds to help define this in a crowded marketplace. This isn't an in-depth tutorial as much as an overview of how Evolve works, and we're going to use that as a basis to compare it with other multi-samplers in the marketplace.
evolvealloy is currently on sale at Plugin Boutique. You can get it on its own or in a bundle. There's an affiliate link in my description if you're interested in buying it. Cube by Lunacy Audio is a multi-sampler with 8 samples. And I guess the question is, are those 8 samples better than 4? The 8 samples are organized into corners of this cube to give it that 3D impression. And in the middle, what you see going on is called an orbit. And the orbit is controlling the relative volume as it moves through its motions between each of the samples. So the 3D orbit defines the dynamic volume between the samples. And this does everything. It does pads, keys, drums, percussion, synths, strings, and bass. It's not specific to a certain genre. What we're looking at right now is the main screen, and the ball in the middle is on an orbit. Each of the balls on the corners represents a sample. And you can see what those sounds are by clicking on the Sounds tab. So from the Sound tab, you see each one of the 8 assignments. Each one can have its own ADSR, its own tone controls, like a high pass and low pass filter, adjustments for pan and tuning, and its starting position for volume. You can solo a particular sample if that's the only one you want to hear in the loop. You can turn on reverse, you can have it loop, and you can turn on monochrome if you don't want the stereo sample to be played in stereo. There is a tweak section that further lets you play around with that one sample in that one corner. See up here it says corner A editor. You've got things like stereo width, key range, and glide. Over here in the ARP section, you have a full arpeggiator. You have to turn on the loop for this to work, but once it's on, you can play this as an ARP. And you can control the length, the velocities, just make some velocity changes, and even adjust the pitch. In the middle here, we can control the loop time relative to the BPM. You can control details like the pattern. Is it going to play as a chord? Up, and down. These are kind of standard arpeggiator options. The octave, the degree of swing, and the number of steps. So the maximum steps you can have are 16 for the arpeggiator. And all of that is just for one of the samples. You see a little diagram up here that shows you how each one of those samples is set up. In the middle, you can browse all of the samples that are available. They're categorized in this way: lush, clean, bass. And then off to the right here, you can scroll through and replace a sample with any of the samples that are in a library. These are the Lunacy samples, and you can also have user samples. So what you're seeing here is the sample browser, and you can load your own user samples if you have the Pro version of Cube. So there's 2 versions: Cube Mini, where you can't load your own samples, but you can buy expansions, or Cube Pro, where you can add your own samples to the library or still buy expansions. And that's not to be confused with the presets for the entire Cube. So like any preset browser, you've got packs, factory presets. So let's say I choose one of those. And off to the right here, it will tell you who the author is, how the macro is assigned, and any details around the effects. So back to the main page, you'll note that you've got a sound, and you've got 3 parameters you can control here. One is called ether. But essentially, all the factory-delivered samples have multiple dynamics to them, potentially multiple samples. So when you increase the ether, you're changing the sound to those multiple dynamics. Then the macro on the right here is sort of your main macro assignment. And it could be assigned to anything, but by default, it's going to be assigned to one of the various effects or capabilities built into Lunacy Audio. I'm using my MIDI controller to adjust those 3 parameters: the ether, is by default being modified by the pitch wheel, and I've assigned encoders to the macro and the filter. So the macro, now the orbits in the middle are going to define your sound. And when you click on the orbit tab, you can disable the orbit and just move this ball in the middle to emphasize one of the corners of a preset sound. If I enable the orbit, I can choose from a long list of preset orbits. And you can see they're also categorized into simple and complex, long. Here's one that plays the sounds in a diamond pattern. You can speed that up so it takes less time to go through the diamonds. Here's another one called Hungry. You've also got choices to randomize the orbit, and you can create your own orbits. Let's listen to some presets. Here's one with the arpeggiator. The factory presets are numerous. It comes with hundreds. Flite by Wavea Audio is the next in this analysis of the evolution of sampling. It's delivered in two modes, a play mode, which is free with more than 200 presets, and a create mode that looks like this. You toggle between the two modes just with the slider at the top of the app. In the create mode, you can see that sounds are made up of 4 sampler instruments listed here and a synth engine. In this case, the synth engine is far more developed than the one, say, in evolvealloy. And the 6th is a noise generator. If we go back to the play mode, you can see you've got pretty standard browser for looking through all of the delivered and loaded presets. If you click on best of here, and I've highlighted some as my favorites. If you look at the create view, you'll see that this particular sound makes use of the samplers, and you can turn them off and on, and the synth engine. So turning off these other samplers makes it clear that we're using sampler 1. And you can see down here we're making use of the note sequencer as well. But there is a note sequencer and a modulation sequencer. There's 3 LFOs. There are several envelopes, a couple filters, and then there's a routing map, which is like a mod matrix where you can determine how these things are applied to the 4 sampler sound sources, the synth engine, and the noise engine. Then in the effects area, you've got a wide range of effects to choose from. Effects 1, effects 2, effects 3, so you can pick any 3. And in the bottom right here, you've got some amp and filter mode controls. On every page, you're going to see these macros down at the bottom, and they can be assigned to your MIDI controller. So I've got, you can see here, I'm controlling the cutoff with one of my encoders. All you have to do is double click on that, and assign it to a CC number. To say that I really like Flite would be an understatement. I find the delivered presets in this really high quality and some interesting sounds that I can actually use in music production. I've previously done a deep dive into Flite, and there's a link to that up above and in the description. But just giving you a bit more overview here of how it compares with some of the other multi-samplers, here's a sound that's making use of two of the sample instruments, female choir, pad, and you can see there's quite an assortment of samples that you can choose from, and you can load your own samples. But what I want to draw your attention to is the synth engine here. So here's the sound, but I'm going to turn off the samplers and just focus on the synth engine. If you click on the synth engine, you'll see this secondary set of control panels that pop up. It's a 3 oscillator engine that can be analog or wavetable, and this little dial controls a lot of the wave options. You see there's quite a few to choose from, everything from FM to some of the latest things like robot and wave. Back on analog, you've got level, pan, the octave, coarse, fine. A lot more controls over these 3 oscillators than you get in some of the other multi-samplers. In fact, this was one of the first samplers that incorporated the sound of a synth, and I found that really quite interesting in terms of modulation, ratio, fine-tuning. I guess if there was one shortcoming, I would say here, is that you can't save your synth definitions as a preset. There is no noise in this particular patch, but it's easy to add it. So let's say we turned off the synth engine and just up the level on the noise. This is white noise. Different kinds of noise. You can control the level. I haven't seen another sampler that incorporates a noise generator. And back to the free play mode, but just like any other browser, you can load packs. A pack called Idealist, and I've picked some presets in here that I thought sounded really good. We can view that in the create mode, a bit more insight into what's generating the sounds. The last multi-sampler we're going to look at is Soundbox by Audiomodern. Now the interesting thing about Soundbox is that it's available both for Mac, Windows, and iOS. And it's a direct competitor, I believe, with Native Instruments Contact. But nothing from Native Instruments is available for the iPad or iOS. So I think Audiomodern is addressing a special market here. Soundbox has 4 sound sources, which you can turn off or on, each one, just like the other samplers that we've seen. In their browser, you can search for a sound by category, and it has favorites. And you'll see in this case, this one has 3 sound sources. And right from the browser, if you click on this little down arrow, you can see what the samples are that make up this sound. This particular bass sound has 4 samples in it. Select one of the sounds. You can see in the case of this guitar sound, it only has 1 sample. And we can dig into that sample by looking at the controls. You can see each sample source can be polyphonic, mono, or legato, and you have these parameters that you can control: transposition, fine-tuning, the ADSR. You can have effects for each sample. Choose from quite a list of effects. There's modulation capabilities. We've seen these in the other multi-samplers as well. There are 4 different modulation patterns that you can choose with predefined patterns. There's an arpeggiator. You can also browse by genre. As you're navigating through the library browser, you can preview by clicking on this little arrow. Or you can click on the main title to load it. I can pick another sample to add to this particular sound. This Soundbox tool is really designed for creating your own packs, bringing in your own samples, and potentially selling or sharing those packs with other Soundbox users. That's kind of their marketing pitch. To see what's going on behind the scenes, if you start with a preset like this one, and you click on this little wrench icon, it'll show you what samples are mapped, and you can see that there's, in this case, multiple samples have been taken to make up this sound. And from here you can control things that you would expect in a sampler, like the sample time, the end and start, fade in, fade out, and the velocity. If you want to create your own sample, you can click on these 3 dots, clear this particular layer, create a new source, in which case there are no samples. And you could drag in your own. You can map that sample across multiple keys. You can hear that one is increasing its tempo with different notes. What Soundbox is after here is to create a community that creates their own packs. And that is really its differentiator. You can download Soundbox for free, but in order to create your own packs and drag in your own samples, you have to buy at least 1 pack from Audiomodern. And then that license will give you the ability to create your own packs and share and join that community. So this is kind of a different approach. And like the other 3, they do sell expansion packs, and there aren't a lot of them so far, but there's some free ones that you can download, and there's some others that you can buy. I think we can safely say that the multi-sampler has taken over where the single sampler left off. And with the incorporation of synth with samplers in one plugin, you've got some new dynamics and new ways to create sounds. Some of these products have a unique way of layering and blending the layering between the different samples and synth sources. evolvealloy uses that XY pad, and Cube uses orbits. Now the orbits are far more dynamic, and that opens up a lot more possibilities. So out of these 4, I'd have to say that Cube, with its 8 sample sources in 3D with the orbits, is probably the most sophisticated. But I also like Flite quite a bit, and I'll tell you why. The synth in Flite is very powerful. In fact, I kind of look at it and say, if I'm going to do sound design, why not start with Flite use the synth, and then boost my sound with the samples. I also mentioned that while Native Instruments dominates sampling sounds and sampled instruments at the moment, Soundbox from Audiomodern is trying to tackle that community. And that's a bit difficult because it's so large and there's so much to choose from there. There are many free libraries for Contact as well as everything that's sold by Native Instruments. So to gain some momentum with a new multi-sampler is a bit tricky. And Audiomodern is the only one here that supports iOS. So all four of these products have their niche. Each is helping to evolve what we do with sampling going forward. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, click on the like button. Consider subscribing to the channel, and if you have any comments or questions or ideas, be sure to add them in. I respond to everybody. Thanks for watching.